Hi, guys. Welcome back to Bible Heroes. If you are new to this podcast, I am your host, Haley Wingo, and today we're going to be talking about King David. Now, King David is by far the most faithful and obedient king of Israel. And we're also going to be taking a look at his predecessor, Saul, and his successor, Solomon. So let's just take a quick overview of David. Now, David truly is the archetype of the underdog story. We can see it in modern day literature and also in modern day movies. When we truly think of an underdog, a lot of these things can be pulled from King David's story. So, the background of King David. Now, he was born to the tribe of Jesse with his seven older brothers. He was a shepherd and all around a great musician. He was seen as probably one of the sweetest boys around, very much beloved. He was born under the reign of King Saul. Now, during this time, Saul was originally given the anointing of God's king. However, Saul, through his own arrogance and disobedience, had lost favor with God. And the prophet Samuel knew that God was displeased with Saul and that he would not give Saul's house the continuance of the ruling of Israel. So when Samuel was sent actually to the house of Jesse, and he told Jesse, "Bring me your sons. One of them will be the future king of Israel." Now, when Jesse heard this, he brought out his seven oldest. He himself did not see David, who was little, and in a sense saw his son as weak and a sweet boy, that he was not king material. However, Samuel said, "No, you're missing a son. Bring that one out." And when he brought David out, he actually anointed David right then and there as the future king of Israel. And during that time, Saul was then wrought with misery and was absolutely plagued by God during that time. And they were actually asked to bring in a musician, and they actually brought in David because David was this fantastic musician. And during that time, the only time he felt peace was when David was playing. Now, also during this time, there was a war going on with the Philistines. And at the head of this, of course, which is the big story that we all know about David's childhood, was Goliath. Goliath was this absolute monster, and David stepped forward and said, "I will fight him." And just with a sling and stones, no armor, no sword, nothing, was able to defeat Goliath. So in later life, he was actually the commander of Saul's army and became very close with Saul, and in fact became his son-in-law through his daughter Micah and best friends with Jonathan. However, because David was just so beloved of the people as this great commander, Saul knew what was going to happen. He already knew he had lost the throne, that when he died, that David would become king, and this absolutely freaked Saul out. And so he ended up basically trying to murder David. And Jonathan, for his great love of David, told him that his father was trying to kill him. So David retreated and went into the woods with an army of loyal men to him. And throughout this time, David showed great obedience to God. Saul multiple times was near David, and in fact, David actually confronted Saul. He actually was able to get near Saul while he was sleeping and remove a piece of his robe. And when Saul awoke, he showed Saul the piece of his robe and said, "I got this close to you and I could have killed you. I mean you no harm." And this actually shows great obedience to God, because while God gave the option for David to kill Saul, God basically had implanted in David's heart that he was the true leader and the true ruler, and David knew that. And he knew that he did not have the right to kill God's anointed. And he wanted God to make that decision and make his own judgment. He did not want to take it by force away from God's own anointed, which was Saul originally. This showed a great obedience and a great trust in God's plan. David also showed great um, favor towards God when eventually Saul and Jonathan were killed in the Philistine war and David became king at age 30. He wanted to build God's temple. However, God instructed him not to, that it would be one of his sons. And while David had every reason to want to build this, he still knew that if God didn't command it and that he wanted him to wait and let his son do it, that that would be fine, that he would wait and let God's plan take effect. Now, David wasn't perfect. David did have failures. David had a very common failure, which was with women, and Bathsheba, who was the wife of Urias, a soldier in his army, he actually ended up having an affair with. And when she became pregnant, out of his love for her, because during that time, the penalty for an adulterous woman would be death, he decided to have Urias left at the battle and murdered, essentially, so he could marry Bathsheba. Now, because of this sin, he did end up losing his son, his first son, with Bathsheba for this great sin. And also, David, throughout his life, was a very permissive father. He absolutely adored his children. But this actually led to destruction with his two eldest, mainly with Amnon and with Absalom. Amnon actually raped his sister Tamar, and David forgave Amnon immediately and didn't punish them. And this absolutely drove Absalom insane until he actually killed Amnon for his sin against his sister Tamar. And then Absalom himself, because he viewed his father as weak, tried to take the throne and was ended up uh, being killed in battle himself. So this actually shows David as being a very permissive father and not having good structure. However, when you look at the difference, though, of Solomon and Saul, Saul was an extremely disobedient man throughout his entire life. He died in disgrace of God. With Solomon, though Solomon originally was a very wise ruler and very much blessed in the beginning by God with wisdom, he himself actually turned to idolatry through his wives, who themselves were idol worshippers. And only because of God's actual love for David did Solomon even was even able to hold on to the throne throughout his entire lifetime, and that was the only reason, because of his love for his father David. But after Solomon's death, his own son ended up losing Israel and losing the lineage because of his failure. And through that, we really can see the fact that it was through David only that truly, from the beginning to end of his life, though mistakes were made, David was the true one that was blessed. That was the one that always was faithful to God and died in grace of God and lived and ruled because of the grace of God and was always favored, even through the mistakes, because though a sinner at heart, he was also loyal and also an extremely obedient worshiper of God. And because of this, he was the most blessed among the three kings. And that is why David truly is the archetype of the underdog and the hero story. Thank you so much, guys. I really hope this was enlightening, and I hope you tune back in next week. Thank y'all so much.